If you are one of the students who's totally done with your practice, you know that every question is answered, you understand all of it, you can just go ahead and start working on tonight's homework. Our class activity today is going to be working on those closure problems. But the first thing we're going to do is take any homework questions. Because here, give me your eyes. I need your eyes so that I know, I'll come to the middle, so that I know we're actually listening to me. So give me your eyes. I'm going to just start calling people out if I can't see your eyes. Your next math journal check will be more detailed than the last one. What was I mainly looking for on this last journal check? What did we talk about? What have we been working on? What?
Completion.
Yeah, like completion. So what do you need for completion? Like what should an assignment have on it? A title, like a header, the assignment numbers, like what? The work. Yeah, the questions answered. You can't just have a header. Now we're like, and so this kind of still is just completion. If you have a question that is filled in with, I don't know how to solve this, or couldn't figure this out, that is unacceptable. That will get your math journal A progressing. So right now is your opportunity to avoid that. So if you have any questions that you couldn't solve, anything that you were confused on, anything you just slop down an answer and get done with it, I want to help you with that right now. If you don't need help on the problem we start going over, work on tonight's homework. Okay, we should all be actively doing something. Grant, take your name, sir. I love it. Doesn't matter if it's a little older. Do you remember what lesson that came from?
2.13.
2:15, seriously? This? Thomas has a bag, 7 green, 5 blue, 4 red for each part below. Find the probability for the given draw. So this is what we're working with to find probability. It's what we want over what we have. So if we start going over, today, by the way, is 10:10. And we could label in our notes Chapter 2 closure, which is also going to be your homework assignment, which is that 130 through 139. So a red marble. So we would say probability of red. We want the number of red over the total in the bag. So how many red marbles are there in that bag, Grant? 4 out of how many total? Yep, 16. 4/16, they can both divide by 4. I get 1/4, or 0.25, or 25%. We're going to do that for red or green, except now how that's going to change. Instead of just 4 on top, my total doesn't change, it's still 16. But if I want a red or green, I have 4 red, 7 green, 11 options there. And then orange, how many oranges are there? So your chance is 0. Other homework questions? Any homework assignments? Alex? 2-127. Do you remember what section that's in? 232. Actually, let's do this real quick. Let's just go through together. I want you guys to look in your math journal. This is the best way to check. So here's the thing. I can't make you do anything, right? Nobody can make you do anything. My advice is that you go through right now and check for these homeworks in your math journals. If you don't have any of them, or if they're not done, that should be a red flag. Grab a Post-it, something, fold that page. You need to come back to it. So 2.1.1, we just looked at that assignment, but it was question 8 to question 17. So you should check on that right now. Make sure it's in there, and if you have questions, Note it, mark it, hold it, do something that we'll come back to it. 2.1.2. Actually, I'll pull it down to this screen, might as well since we're recording. 2.1.2 was questions 26 through question 30. And if you are missing headers or dates, now's a good time to do that too. 2.2.1 for the practice was question 36 through 41. Patrick? So the generic rectangles. It breaks down the generic rectangles. Let me get rid of the toolbars. Right above here. So I want to break it apart by what unit it is. I break apart the ones, the tens. If I had hundreds, I'd break that separately. So I'm going to slide this back up to the TV for a second. 54 times 32. So we make the rectangle, right? How do we split our numbers? So let's play that out for a second. Let's say we had 54 times 1,332. I'd have a lot more boxes here, right? Because I do 1,000 times 50, then 300 times 50. I'd do all those. We're starting with easier values just to practice this. So when I break the number, I'm saying this is really 50 and 4. This is really 30 and 2. Easiest thing to do, multiply the numbers, carry the zeros. 3 times 5, 15, 2 zeros, 15 and 2 zeros. That's what makes a generic rectangle so easy. 4 times 3, 12, 1 0. 4 times 2, just 8, no zeros. Right there. 50 times 2, 5 times 2, 10, 1 extra 0. That's where people goof up. Because they're like, oh yeah, 5 times 2, 10, and 1 0. Okay, we have 1 0. No, 1 extra 0. And then we add all those up to get our sum. So then we would just say like equals 16, 17, 28. Guys, nobody taught us multiplication like this when I was back in school. I'm honestly like upset about it. Like this isn't me as a teacher. When you show this to people that went through like academia back in the way where we're just like, just memorize it, just carry the, like when you show them the easier ways, people like get brokenhearted. Because they're like, if only somebody had taught me the easier way, maybe I would have been good at math. Like we are trying to teach you guys strategies to make math easy. Not that it won't take effort, but to make it accessible. We don't want to make it harder. We want to make it easier. What other preguntas?
Wait, what?
Spanish for questions. Preguntas. I will bring that in when it's fun to do. Anything from the 36 through 41? Anything else? Matt?
What was the homework for
Last Thursday? Well, can somebody tell them? That'd be quicker if you just flip in your plan book. I mean, it should... Actually, I can try to find it pretty quick. 231. Excuse me, Matt. It would have been 115. There we go, 115 to 120. 221. Sorry, we just went over that. 222 homework should be practice problems 51 to 55. Any questions from those? 51 to 55. We are going to practice in the closure activity rewriting decimals or rewriting fractions to decimals. Any from that homework that you want to go over? Two, 2, 3. was practice problems 62 to 66. Okay, so that I'm not trying to play gotcha, but when your parents email me and they ask why you have a progressing on this next math journal check, I will email them back this video. Say, we went over every single homework they should have had, and I gave them time to ask questions. Yeah? Oh.
I'm sorry. We had 58 through 60. No, 58 through 60, right?
58 through 60. That was probably lesson work. We were answering these questions during the lesson.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the homework was 62 through 66. So if those are in your math journal, that's just because we did them in class. Because these we were practicing, like, how do we make zeros? Now, if you look up here, this was classwork when we were playing with the tiles and we made the zeros. So when we, like, add in the positives, it cancels out. And then here we were breaking up the numbers to make zeros or combining them to join forces. 224's homework would have been practice problems 79, using absolute value, up through 84. More mean and median. Any questions, Francesca?
Question 82.
Yeah.
Or not 82, 81. I couldn't get C.
Couldn't get C. Which means 14 is the sum and 49 is the product. So we have our, everyone calls these different things, magic rectangle or whatever they call it here, magic square. Sum product. So think about numbers that can add to make 14 and produce 49. So Francesca, the easiest thing really to do is make a factor list to say, okay, how can I make 49? Well, 1 and 49, would that add to 14? No. And then we start working through it. 2 won't work because it's odd, at least won't work with integers. 3, no, not a factor. 4, no, because 40, 48 are factors. 5, 6, 7, 7 and what? Oh. Adds up to 14, multiplies to make 49. They do not have to be different numbers. So even though it says x and y could be the same thing. Does that make sense, Francesca? Other questions from that homework? Yeah. Sorry. A1B. Ooh, so this is weird because they give you the sum and one piece of it. So, actually, I think when we start talking about this and I ask you a couple questions, this will, like, kind of show itself. When we do this, and especially if you're struggling on a problem that you think you shouldn't be struggling on, always take breaks. If you're, like, having a mental block, take a break. When you come back to it with fresh eyeballs, it can help immensely. So they've given you 8 and 15. So what's the 15 here? You asked. You gotta help me. It's the sum of what? If we look at the guide rectangle, it's filled in here. We had an x, and this is x, y. So this 15 will be the sum of, in this square, the sum of 8 and, hold on, you're like overthinking it for a moment. We know this is a sum, right? The addition. The what happened when we put them together. I use these two values to add up and get that value. So if I know that I have to use 8, what should add with 8 to make 15? 7. So if this is 7 and this is the product of my x and y, what's 7 times 8? 56. So that xy is 56, and we're done. Does that make sense? Yeah. Sweet. Other questions? Moving on to the next assignment. It was from 225. Please check header, date, all that stuff. 225's homework was 90 to 94. Questions from 90 to 94. Next homework was 226. That assignment was 101 to 105. Anything from 101 to 105? Any questions remaining? All right, 2 point. Oh, ooh, Monica, what's up?
So for 105 it says to
Draw a coordinate grid.
yeah, I don't know.
Coordinate is a weird word to say. So make both the x-axis and the y-axis go from -10 to +10, then plot the following points. So if we struggle on this, sometimes going to the homework help can give me a huge advantage. Or just how do I start? How do I really get this figured out? So it will give me the answer if I want, but first it says plot the points on the graph you made. Remember, the first point is the x, second point's the y. Then it's supposed to go from -10 to +10. You guys also have the world at your fingertips, quote unquote, or whatever. But if I search -10 to 10 graph, I can see what it needs to look like. Did not match here, that's a lie. So really what it's going to be is a 20 by 20 graph. I'll show you what it looks like. -10 to +10. -10 to +10. And if you wanted to be really, really like efficient, I don't want to say lazy, but if you wanted to be efficient and you have a printer accessible, I'm just going to put that graph on my homework paper. Or if I have graph paper, that would be very easy to make the axes. You need to make sure that it goes -10 to +10 on both the x and the y. Then all 4 points go on the same graph. So if we have one graph, like I can take a sheet of graph paper, make 2 big axes, and then that graph is what I put everything on. If my computer wouldn't freeze. There we go. So now, Annika, my x values, right? My first number, my hint told me my first number is my x values. Is that the left and right or the up and down? Which axis is the x? The left and right? The horizontal or the vertical? So, you know, if you want to know my memory trick, it's not really like a math rule or anything. Y high. Y high. Right? X high doesn't really go together. But Y and high, how high is the point? The Y is how high. That's just how I remember it. So the X tells me I go to -2.2, just past the 2. And then 4.64, 1, 2, 3, 4.6 will be a little over the midpoint. So I need to erase those extras, but right about there. Then a positive 8.2 for my X says go right and just past the 8. Then up a little over 7.5. So up to a little over 7. About halfway between 7 and the 8. -3 and 4/7. Now the fractions gets weird to graph. How can I figure out 4/7? What can I relate it to? What's an easy fraction to think about graphing? If I'm in between 3 and 4, you might say I've gone in between. Starts with H. Half, right? I always can compare things to a half. If I think about a pizza, right? I cut my pizza into 7 slices. I'm going to eat 4. Did I get more or less than half of it? Did I get more or less than half? More, right? If I got 4, somebody else only got 3, I got more. So that is slightly over -3.5. But be careful especially if you have any issues graphing, I would look up here. -3 is here. -3.5 is here below it. It's more negative. So I go about -3.5, but that's going to be x. Sorry, so -3.5 is past the -3. Then -9 3/10. -9 3/10. Something like that, and I can erase that little tick. You can make working marks as you're going. You can draw light lines to help guide you. And then D, 0.62, so barely over half, and then -5.1. So guys, know that I not only look through for completion, but I spot check some problems to see did you actually do it like the way it asked you to. So if you didn't draw a graph, it's pretty obvious, especially when it's the last problem on your homework. If you don't solve a multiplication using the generic rectangle, it's pretty obvious. Like when you straight up don't follow directions, that's not going to be a mastery. Okay, we've got to get used to following directions. There is a reason for all of this. We're trying to make the math easy for you. So Annika, does that help seeing that graphed out? I don't like how far away the points are. I mean, you make a pretty big graph to graph like what seem to be just random points. These don't seem to be related to each other. And to 3.1, getting further into last week's homework, we had questions to 115 to 120. This is getting to that, like, I wouldn't even be surprised if you're not done with it quite yet. If you've been busy, I wouldn't be surprised if you're not done with this. Do we have any questions? 115 to 120. Yeah. 116B. I'm just going to do it on this screen then. B as in boy or dog? Boy. What is -30? Is that some product piece? What is it? Yeah, it's the product, right? It's the x times the y. And this, according to my little diagram over here, is one of the pieces of that. So if I know that this -30 is made with the multiplication of 6 and something else. Well, if this is negative, what do I know about the two pieces that make it? Can you say anything about how we make a negative with multiplication? We multiply with a negative, right? So if this is not negative, this will have to be negative. To make a negative number, we have to have one of them in the multiplication. And then, how many 6's make 30? 5. So then when we add these, and this is where it's dangerous, these guys fight each other, right? We have a positive and a negative. They're not on the same team. Who wins? The positive by how much? So our sum is 1. Yeah. 115A. Actually, we'll be more efficient since I'm actually working on there. So there's that last problem if you still needed that. Complete the sketch. I love these problems. Thank you for asking that, because people are still struggling on these and they're afraid to ask about it. So guys, we got to build confidence with asking questions. The smartest people in the world ask the most questions because they want to know, right? That's how you get smart. You want to know. Let's make this easier for a minute. Let's say that so I'll show you guys a video at some point to make you care about this. But let's say I decide to join a speed climbing competition. And here is the rock wall. Right, and actually speed climbing competitions are sweet. So if you're bored and you're mastering, Google search speed climbing. Well, let's say they have strategically placed holds all the way up the wall, equal distanced to the final hold. So from my start, I have to scale this wall, going 1 move, 2 moves, 3, 4, 5, 6 moves to get me to my top. Right, you with me? This is not a direct problem from your homework, but it will make more sense. Let's imagine all we care about is the vertical shifts, and they're all equal. So, essentially, make this a number line. Right, we have our number line. Let's say I climb to a height of 30 feet with 6 equal-sized moves. How big would each of my moves have to be? Alex? 5, right? We now, like, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, I get to 30. That's what we're doing here. Except we're not starting at 0. We're starting at 32, and we're asking ourselves, how many moves do I have, and how far do I need to go? Well, how many moves or steps or jumps or whatever you want to say, how many do I take? 4. How far do I travel? From 32 to 64, what's the difference in their values? So to figure out, Arnica, what do? Ooh, this is not subtraction. Well, I did, so this, maybe you were answering that. This we did through subtraction. We did 64 minus 32 equals 32, so I hate that we use the same number twice. So my gap between there is a size of 32. How do I figure out each step? Divide. So each step will be that total distance divided by the number of steps. So if you want a new rule to write down, the size of the step will be how far you have to travel divided by how many steps. Now you have to think steps, not marks, because that will get you in trouble. But here my distance is 32. How many steps did we take? 4, and what do we get? 8. So 8 plus 8 plus 8 plus 8, does that get me 32? Yes. Now B, we barely go anywhere. B goes I hate green. B goes a distance of how far? 1, right? Okay, great. You're so excited. Distance of 1 divided by how many steps? Patrick? Because I don't just look at lines, I go 1, 2, 3, 4. Each step is 1/4 or 0.25. So then, using the scale that we found, we have to fill in the number lines. So I'm going to erase some of this so I can fill in the number line. If I now know that my steps are worth 8 each, 32 plus 8 would get me to where? 40, then anybody? 48, and then 56. Now down here, 0, my first step gets me to 0.25, then half, then 75 hundredths. There we go. Now we'll do the same thing on the other graph axis. Whether it's vertical or horizontal, doesn't matter. We do the same process. Distance divided by amount of steps. We have a little over 10 minutes left. I'll try to show some fun video at the end. Yeah.
16.
1/16, you mean? Or just 16?
The first question I asked, the one after it.
Maybe I did just never get to it. Maybe I got too excited. The first question you asked was actually 15, because I think you had said it's from a minute ago. From a little way back. Nope, too far. Golden or magic square problem. The whole thing? So I think you can probably do it now that we've seen these in other problems. This didn't tell you what the pattern was. It was trying to make you discover the pattern. So you were supposed to just play with this for a little bit to be like, wait, so if I add these, I can get that, and if I multiply this, I can get that. If I add these, I can get that, multiply these. So now that we know the trick, we should be able to go back and complete these. So like if I look at A, what's the bottom of A going to be? And what's the top of it? 12, because then it's product. Sum here. Product. Sum, ooh, don't know. Left rectangle or left square? 6, because it has to multiply, so sum. Ooh. This is the toughest one. Got to figure out what adds to 11, multiplies to 28.
Oh, 7 and 4.
Think about your factors. So we have 1 and 28, that doesn't work. 2 and 14, that won't work. What'd you say?
7 and 4.
7, well, I should have gone 4. And actually, I think 3 is also, no, 3 is not a factor there. 7 and 4, add to 11, multiply to 28. There we go, 7 and 4. Back to the one we were just looking at. Somebody said I'm so. Is that a positive or negative? I'm so.
I think if you did 116D and one more example of those,
yeah,
that was one I started as being one of the toughest ones.
Ooh, I zoomed in too far. 116D as in dog. All right. So if you've not done this yet, because it's just from last week's homework, join me on this. We want to think about the factors of 234. I guess I'll use X and Y since they had used X and Y. It doesn't like when I do that. Obviously 1 and 234. We can go ahead and rule that out. Right? So we need factors that will add up to make 31, but yet multiply to make this giant number. So when I start thinking 1 and 234, that's obviously wrong because this is way too big. But then if I think 2 and, what would be the number that 2 would multiply to get 234? Break apart the 200, half, 100. Half of 30, 15, half of 4, so 117, still doesn't work. We can start to play with this and use a calculator if we want. Now it can't solve it for us, but to figure out factors, take your starting value and divide it by what you're playing with. So if you didn't play with this problem, go ahead and grab a calculator if you want, and if I type in 234 divided by 3, I can find out its other factor of 78. If I do divided by 4, I can find out another factor set. Except that's messy. This is 58.5, so we know that that won't work. 5, we can see will not divide evenly. 6 might. We don't know, so let's try it. Ooh, 6 works. Am I getting closer to the addition that I want? Yeah, right now I'm at 45. I'm close. Still not there. Let's try 7. Ooh, ugly. 33.428. Gross. And it goes on. Ooh, 8. It's 29.25. Try 9 as a factor. Ooh, 9 and 26. Does that work? Crap, no. That gets me 35. We're still getting closer. Divide by 10 won't work. Divide by 11 is doubtful. Divide by 12. Still a decimal. Divide by 13. Hey, 13 is not a decimal. 13 and 18 are factors of that. And that's it. Hopefully you don't keep going and keep playing with it. But to find a factor set, you might want to write this down, jot a note somewhere. We take the number we have to start, and we just divide it by whatever we want. Whatever factor you want to try, Your answer will be the other factor. So you are trying to find out a factor set. So I'll move that cursor. Take 234 divided by whatever number you want. It could be crazy. Your answer will be the other factor. So that's how we found all of these. I do not expect you to memorize factors of 234. That would be ridiculous. However, the multiplication table I gave you, I think was like a 15 by 15 or a 12 by 12 or something. This still isn't on there. Right? I gave you that as a great reference page. Sometimes your reference still isn't big enough. So, use your calculator when you need to. Do not use it all the time, but use it when you need to. Other questions? I think we'll probably... Now, this is not saying don't do your homework tonight. But we will spend time tomorrow going over questions from the... from the closure activity. That's what I get for eating this giant banana this morning. Seriously, my wife bought like this bunch of bananas. Do you think bananas got bigger? These bananas are huge. Like, I think it was a good year for bananas. All right, so check this out. We have one more homework to talk about, which was from last week. We have 5 minutes left. I want to take any questions from this. Tomorrow, I will take questions from the closure activity. I'm not saying we won't move on and do new stuff. But if you have questions, I will take as long as we need. Now, when you ask a question, I'm going to come by and look at your homework. If your homework paper is blank and you didn't even try anything, that's not a question, that's you didn't try it. So I need to see that you put some effort into it this evening. We still have 5 minutes. We don't need to pack up yet. But from 232, from last night's homework, do we have questions that we actually tried and couldn't do? Alex.
I didn't understand on 127 what it meant by
simplify. So anytime we see simplify, it's telling us write this more easily, right? And if you can, try to solve it. So here, what that really means is since, especially my first number is fraction decimal, and down here we have fraction mixed number, we want to make things in a form that are easy to work with. What's another way I can say 0.8? The proper way. How do I properly say 0.8? 8/10, right? So I could write this instead as 2/3 times 8/10. How do I multiply a fraction with a fraction? Not Patrick, not me. Somebody I haven't really talked to today. How do I multiply fraction with fraction? Straight through, right? Across the top and across the bottom. 2 times 8? 3 times 10? That I could leave it right there, and I have simplified it. Now, I could reduce this. These are both even. So if I'm going to simplify all the way, I want to keep going until I can't. So we divide by 2, divide by 2. We do the same thing top and bottom. I did not actually change anything. This is right about where we get stopped. Down in D, when we look at doing this, don't forget about the negative. It's going to be dangerous. 1 and 1/3. I hate mixed numbers. How do I make a mixed number easier? Huh? Improper. Do my little triangle method. What's this become? 4/3. Now straight through top, straight through bottom. Do not forget your negative. So sorry, that's negative 16 over 15. We still have like 2 minutes. She's releasing early. So if you'd like, I'm going to pull up a video speed climbing really quick so you know what I'm talking about. What?